And now, Surviving the Elements, brought to you by the Home Depot. You can do it, we can help.
They're among the biggest storms on Earth.
I don't want to hear that wind again.
Hurricanes can last for weeks.
It's just impossible to imagine it unless you're in it.
They can cross entire oceans and bring devastation wherever they touch land.
When you hear all the power lines and stuff just rip completely off the side of your house, and that scares the hell out of you.
At their heart is an eerie zone of near calm, the eye of the storm. This is some of the most ferocious weather the Earth can produce. The ultimate in storms. Hurricanes. They're killers. Hurricanes have destroyed millions of homes with their devastating arsenal of weapons. Wind, rain, surge, and waves.
I was so scared, I think I was in shock because I wasn't functioning.
I think the worst aspect was the wind. The wind was howling at 115, 120 miles an hour. Never want to go through it again. It was terrible.
They've taken hundreds of thousands of lives all around the world.
I would evacuate the next time, definitely. I don't care if they say it's a Category 1 or Category 2, 3, or 4, or 5. I don't care what they say it is. I'm not going to stay for it. I don't want to hear that wind again.
The hurricane's weapons are awesome. Within the vast body of the storm are some of the fastest winds on Earth. In just a few days, a hurricane can produce a year's rainfall across a whole region, or bring a wall of water smashing in off the sea. We can do our best to resist them. But we may as well just turn and run, because the power of the hurricane just keeps on coming.
When it approaches, to watch the ocean change that dramatically, it's a natural adrenaline high. I mean, it's just such a feeling that you get, you know? I mean, it is nature all around you.
A hurricane is simply a low-pressure area that originates in the tropics or sometimes the subtropics and reaches winds of 74 miles per hour or higher.
Hurricanes need energy, a source of heat to fuel their movement. And the heat comes from the warm oceans of the world. Tropical cyclone-sized storms appear in the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Indian Oceans, the Bay of Bengal, and the Arabian Sea. They usually form over water that's warmer than 79 degrees Fahrenheit. A series of big thunderstorms gathers. They merge together and start to spin around a low-pressure area. The storm is organizing. Sea conditions worsen. Waves build. The winds speed up. When sustained winds hit 74 miles an hour, it's official. We have a hurricane. This is how it works. Warm seawater makes the air above heat up and rise. An updraft has been created. More air rushes in from the sides to fill in the space. The mighty heart of the hurricane has started to pump. In the western Pacific, they're called typhoons, and tropical cyclones everywhere else. But they're all the same kind of massively powerful storm. They all share the same basic anatomy, and we can see it best from space. The outer region of hurricane clouds looks like a spiral galaxy.
You go from enjoying the beauty of hurricanes when they're far out at sea to becoming nervous and in warning mode to warn people on how to protect themselves, to really an almost sickening feeling when a major hurricane hits a coastline.
The cyclone gets more intense as we get closer to the center, until we hit the region of maximum devastation. This lies in an inner ring called the eye wall, because it surrounds the calm in the center of the hurricane, the eye itself. Let's see the strength of these hurricanes. First, the awesome force of the wind. Hurricane Andrew was small but ferocious. Florida, August 1992. Millions evacuated, taking to the highway as Andrew approached. Coming on quickly like a buzzsaw, Andrew was a Category 5. Miami lies like a bullseye on the tropical Florida coast. Andrew didn't even pause as it took out the southern suburb of the city. Andrew was a severe hurricane, one of the worst. It did more damage in the U.S. than any other hurricane in history. Some $26 billion. More than 25,000 homes were destroyed. Stanley Goldenberg's was one of them. Not only that, he was inside at the time.
We can hear things start to fly around out there. I'm sure we're approaching hurricane force winds.
Imagine the worst happens. A major disaster takes out your home and your valuables. Are you prepared? Hi, I'm meteorologist Alexandra Steele with some tips for surviving the elements.
Did you get the table?
If you close your eyes, can you list everything in the room? Probably not. Now try to imagine having to do that for your insurance agent following a hurricane. That's why it's important to take a home inventory. It provides a solid record if anything is destroyed. List the major items in each room of your home. Make sure you include the serial number and purchase price. Include the date of purchase and the receipt if you have it. Take pictures or video of your items as well. Then keep your inventory in a safe place away from your house, perhaps at a friend's or relative's. And update your records as necessary. The Insurance Information Institute also has a free software program, downloadable from the website to help you out at www.iii.org. Surviving the Elements Hurricane will return right after this.
Andrew shows the power of Category 5 hurricane force winds. The structure of a hurricane may look orderly from here, but if you're down on the ground, it's chaotic. There are isolated wind gusts much stronger than the sustained winds. And what they do to buildings can be surprising. The gusts do damage in streaks. One house or mobile home has gone, but its next-door neighbors are relatively unscathed. Let's go inside one of these gusts. Stanley Goldenberg, a meteorologist, found himself in the heart of one of Andrew's streaks.
You can start to hear the roar outside.
This is Stanley's report from inside Hurricane Andrew and the home video he filmed at the time.
I wish I had a meter. We can hear things start to fly around out there. I'm sure we're approaching hurricane force winds.
We were here during the worst part of the storm. We were first in the hallway, and then we tried to get to the garage, but it was already gone, so we ended up in the kitchen. While we were there, the whole roof had been ripped off of the house, flew over the fence, and smashed right into the neighbor's house. And I believe they were in it at the time.
This is what the neighborhood looked like the next day when Stanley crawled out into the open. His house was totally destroyed, but a few houses along, they're almost unscathed. It's a classic streaky wind pattern. The eye wall is the danger zone. Why does it get more intense closer to the center? It's a bit like an ice skater. The air entering a hurricane rotates. It has spin. As the air moves closer to the center of the hurricane, it spins faster. It's like when a skater pulls her arms closer to the center. She turns faster. So in a hurricane, the spin at the eye wall is much faster than the spin further out. The eye wall can be the area of ultimate destruction. This residential neighborhood south of downtown Miami felt the full force of Hurricane Andrew's assault on Florida. The eye wall passed right over this spot.
There was a bedroom here, bathroom right here.
The eye wall passed right over this spot. There wasn't much still standing when Hurricane Andrew left town.
And many people that went back couldn't find their homes. The street signs were down, all the tree landmarks were gone, their houses were unrecognizable. They didn't know where they were.
99% of all the mobile homes here were destroyed. 11 years later, there's still nothing. Andrew's winds didn't just hit houses. Across southern Florida, boats were thrown ashore and planes smashed. Andrew's winds may have gusted up to 200 miles per hour. This is about 50 miles an hour. Not a hurricane yet. This is Category 1, a baby as hurricanes go. Category 2 winds will blow you down the street. Do you want to know what Category 3 is actually like? It's not just enough to blow you off your feet and down the road. It's enough to make you fly. They train skydivers here. The effects look like weightlessness. It seems graceful, but hurricane winds can reach 1.5 times this speed. In the open, with no protection, that's not graceful. It's terrifying. When winds with these speeds occur between tall buildings, it's actually possible for this to happen, for the wind to knock people right off their feet. But wind is only one of the hurricane's devastating weapons. If we could predict hurricanes exactly, it would be easier to prepare for them. Sometimes we don't know exactly where they're going, or how hard the wind will blow. Enter the hurricane hunters, and a typhoon that leaves them helpless.
Your home is probably the most valuable thing you own. It's also the most vulnerable to a hurricane, but it doesn't have to be. Hi, I'm meteorologist Alexandra Steele with some tips for surviving the elements. Roofs ripping off. It's a major problem for homeowners during a hurricane. But for about $50, you could make your roof a little less vulnerable. The Institute for Business and Home Safety recommends using a caulking gun and running a 1/4-inch bead of wood glue down the side of the rafter where it touches the plywood decking from underneath. Consider an impact-resistant garage door. Keeping the wind out of what is typically the largest opening in the house could help protect the entire structure. Protecting your doors and windows is also very important. Impact-resistant glass is probably the best bet, but also the most expensive. Storm shutters are the next option. And the least expensive solution is plywood. It's important to note that while these tips may help, if you are told to evacuate, you should. Stay tuned. Surviving the Elements Hurricane will return right after this.
The hurricane hunters. As soon as Andrew was within range, they scrambled. One way A dangerous way to find out more about a tropical cyclone is to get inside. These Air Force Reserve hurricane hunters have given us new insights, but the storms stay one step ahead. Their nature is unpredictable. Flying straight into the hurricane, they drop these probes which go right through the heart of the hurricane. They transmit information about temperature, pressure, wind speed, and humidity. It all helps in measuring the hurricane's strength and track. Three days before Andrew hit land, it was only a tropical storm. But Andrew was getting more violent. The scientists needed to know how violent and how quickly it was intensifying. Hurricanes may be massive and powerful, but forecasting them is still a challenge. Only some of them hit land, and that's when the destruction usually starts. Typhoon Faye from 1995 shows how huge waves can devastate, sinking more than 70 ships. Ulsan Harbor in Korea isn't a good place to be when a typhoon hits. These massive freighters were carefully secured. It wasn't good enough. This ship was torn loose and headed for the rocks. Crew members could only cling to their vessel. Some of them didn't make it. Hurricane winds act on the sea's surface over great distances, and for a long time to produce these gigantic waves. Waves do massively more damage than wind moving at the same speed. Water carries almost 1,000 times more energy than air. And it's not just winds and waves. Hurricanes also destroy with rain. Look at what Hurricane Mitch did when it deluged Central America in 1998. It picked up massive amounts of water over the sea and dropped it as rain. Hurricane Mitch spent nearly 6 days around Honduras and Nicaragua. 35 inches of rain fell on some mountain areas. Mitch traveled slowly, pretty much at a walking pace, and that's what made its rainfall so destructive. Prolonged saturation. Overwhelmed by this amount of water, rivers topped their banks and massive flooding occurred. Buildings on steep slopes became vulnerable as mud began to flow downhill. People in the valleys were in great peril. The streets of the capital became rivers. Buildings were washed away. The crater of the Las Casitas volcano overflowed with rainwater from Hurricane Mitch. That caused mudslides, rivers of mud, rocks, and boulders flowing onto the town below. But even rain isn't a hurricane's last weapon. It has one more up its sleeve, one that is truly terrifying. It can be more deadly than wind, waves, or rain.
Say the worst happens. You have to evacuate because of a hurricane. Do you have what it takes to hit the road? Hi, I'm meteorologist Alexandra Steele with some tips for surviving the elements. Before you have to hit the road, have a plan. Know where you'll go if you're asked to evacuate. Consider it whether it will be a friend's house, a motel, or a shelter. Keep a road map in your car. You may have to alter your route if major roads are closed or congested. When you're packing up the car, many of the items you should include are those you'd use when camping. Sleeping bags, pillows, battery-operated radio, batteries, first aid kit, flashlight, and foodstuffs. But additionally, have a month's supply of any medication you need and the prescription, and keep them dry in a tightly closed container. Then put those in sealable plastic bags. Also important documents such as your driver's license, social security card, and insurance policies. We'll be right back with Surviving the Elements Hurricane.
And now, Surviving the Elements, brought to you by Outback Steakhouse and Duracell.
What's more deadly than the winds, waves, and rain of a hurricane? It's called storm surge.
The big death events have occurred in surges, tremendous loss of life.
The effect of wind on the ocean pushes a mass of water towards the coast. The water, sometimes as high as a house, rushes ashore with terrible violence. Storm surge doesn't just strike with one blow. It's a continuous assault that can do tremendous damage. All hurricanes that reach land produce surge. This is Hurricane Camille. It smashed into Mississippi in 1969.
So you had 35 to 40 foot waves, you had a surge of 15 to 20 feet, and you had winds with gusts of 200 miles per hour that destroyed almost everything in its path right along the beach and well in it as well.
The next morning, which was about like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, they had come over to the school over and they told me, they said, Lawrence, you need to go over there and see about your family. We believe your family is gone. This has been haunting me all my life. I mean, Camille has put this kind of effect on me. It took a part of my life away from me.
This is Hurricane Gordon in North Carolina in 1994. All as a result of warm seawater and low pressure. Meet Hurricane George, which haunted the Caribbean for 11 days in September 1998. George's story shows how hurricanes live and die. All hurricanes start over the sea. They harvest their energy from warm water. When they hit land, they're starved of that heat. They start to diminish. But George was an endurance champion. It began to dissolve as it passed over the islands of Puerto Rico and Hispaniola. When it hit land, as we can see from its track, the hurricane lost intensity. But each time, George made it back over water, where it refueled and strengthened. When a hurricane moves over a continent, it's on its way out. The power source is switched off. The hurricane begins to die. George only stopped being a hurricane as it moved into the American South. During a hurricane's life, it does more than just wreak havoc. These killer storms actually have one positive characteristic. Hurricanes almost always move heat away from the equator, and this helps cool down the tropics. After a hurricane has passed over, it can leave the sea several degrees colder. As it moves the heat and moisture it picks up from the water towards the cooler polar regions. This helps to reduce the heat difference between hot and cold parts of the world. Hurricanes are like a form of tropical air conditioning and polar heating, and they aren't going away. We have to learn to deal with them, and we may be able to learn something from a primitive culture that's centuries old.
After a hurricane sweeps through, home sweet home may not be so sweet anymore, and you'll want to know what to do. Hi, I'm meteorologist Alexandra Steele with some tips for surviving the elements. If you were evacuated and you're like most, your first thought is to return to survey the damage. But do not go back to your home until officials say it's safe. It may help to listen to the radio or TV for the latest information and instructions. When you do return, watch for any downed power lines and avoid them. They still may be live. Also, be sure to use a flashlight to inspect your home and never light candles. If a gas line has been broken, the flame could spark an explosion. And make a record of your damage with video or photos for insurance purposes. Surviving the Elements hurricane will return right after this.
This is the southern Pacific Ocean, where Cyclone Zoe met the island of Tikopia at the very end of 2002. It shows how people can adapt to living with hurricanes. Cyclone Zoe had some of the fastest wind speeds ever observed in the Southwest Pacific, at 180 miles an hour. But when Zoe hit Tikopia, no one was killed. On Tikopia, they faced the dangers of cyclones for centuries. They've learned their own ways to survive. There are only about 1,500 people on Tikopia. Using paths their ancestors wore down in previous emergencies, they took to the caves on high ground. The first outsider to land after the tropical cyclone took these images of them emerging. But what does the experience of a remote island mean to the rest of the world? This scientist is studying the effects of hurricanes on the swamplands of Louisiana and the deep south of the U.S. He's trying to find out how nature copes with hurricanes. The best way to do it is from the air. Hurricane Lily hit in 2002. Before they built New Orleans, the whole of the Mississippi Delta looked like this. Vast wetlands, green and lush. And right in the path of hurricanes. Hurricanes wreak havoc with buildings and cities. For hundreds of years, these wetlands have also absorbed the wrath of hurricanes. But they don't get totally destroyed, just rearranged. Look at these finger-shaped channels. They didn't used to be here. Remember what Hurricane Andrew did to Miami? The same kind of wind gust caused this streaky damage, actually pushing the marsh aside. Nature usually copes with hurricane attacks. But 11 of the world's 15 biggest cities lie along coast. Millions of people live within the reach of hurricanes. We can't all escape to caves in the hills. One possible protection is a hurricane-resistant house. And where hurricanes are a major danger, some people are building for the worst. What can wind actually do to a home? Fortunately, the people who lived here had taken shelter elsewhere. A mobile home's weakness is its lack of a foundation. The home is only tethered to the ground. Break the link, and this is the result. Wind can rip solid buildings to pieces. This cameraman had a lucky escape. The wind has taken the roof off, and it could bring the whole building down. Objects picked up by hurricane winds become shrapnel. This corrugated iron is embedded in a tree. And look at what this plank did to this house. Think about what that could do to the human body. This team of engineers mimics a hurricane force. The test projectile is accelerated to hurricane speed. This is typical roofing material. Now let's try that again. This is specially designed hurricane roofing, a worthwhile investment in hurricane country. The team is deconstructing a house almost like hurricanes do, but they're using a crane. This test will help them build a better hurricane-resistant home. Special ridge nails can withstand over twice as much pressure as an ordinary nail. Waterproofing is tested with mammoth fans. When the wind hits a house, it travels over the roof, and its speed increases. It tries to lift the roof right off. Just an open window can cause disaster. Many people tape up windows, but it doesn't necessarily help when a hurricane comes around. Impact-resistant glass can keep debris out even when it's broken. It's two pieces of glass with a piece of plastic sandwiched in between. You need protection in hurricane country, especially in one U.S. city that some people think is a disaster waiting to happen.
When a hurricane's about to make landfall, the last thing some people think about is what to do with their pets. Hi, I'm meteorologist Alexandra Steele with some tips for surviving the elements. If it's not safe for you to stay in your home during a hurricane, it's not safe for your pets. If you're asked to evacuate, make sure you evacuate them as well. But here's the catch. Many shelters don't allow pets, so planning ahead is very important. Check with surrounding hotels and motels to see what their policies are regarding animals. Ask friends or relatives outside the affected area if they'll help care for them. Also check with local veterinarians, kennels, and animal shelters, and compile a list of those that will foster animals in an emergency. When that's done, put together a supply kit for your pet. Include things like food, water, and bowls. as well as any medication, leashes, a carrier, and even a photo in case they get lost. Also include instructions on their care and the name and number of your vet. And make sure your pet has a collar and a tag.
We'll be right back with Surviving the Elements Hurricane.
This is New Orleans. Like many of the world's major cities, it lies near a coast where hurricanes strike. This scientist believes it's a disaster waiting to happen. If a Category 4 was to head straight for New Orleans, he believes it would be a catastrophe. October 2002, Hurricane Lily was approaching Louisiana, a Category 4, and uncomfortably close to New Orleans. New Orleans isn't just in the path of hurricanes, it's surrounded by water, some of it sitting as much as 5 feet below sea level. New Orleans is trapped between the Mississippi River and lakes. These are levees, giant dams, part of the flood defense system that surrounds the city. Here, houses lie only feet from the water. It's even possible that the levee system could channel hurricane surge right into the city. New Orleans is also ringed by chemical and oil processing plants. Scientists don't know what would happen to them if a hurricane hit hard. Worst of all, this exit could be blocked. The causeways are one of the main escape routes from the city. Calculations show surge from a Category 5 hurricane could be around 6 feet higher than road level. New Orleans is a disaster waiting to happen. Lily only hit with the force of a Category 1 and missed the city. It was a lucky escape. It's not just New Orleans that's in danger. In the last few decades, there's been massive development on many of the world's coastlines. This is Galveston, Texas, 100 years ago. The worst hurricane disaster in U.S. history. Around 8,000 killed. Thousands more people live on the coast today, but the stakes could be getting higher still. Not only are there more cities for the hurricanes to destroy, but there may also be more hurricanes. Most scientists believe global temperatures are rising. With more heat in the atmosphere, there could be more hurricanes. They could be more severe, too. Scientists are trying to find out if hurricanes are getting worse, and they're looking in an unusual place. There are few reliable records of hurricane strengths before 1900. In terms of climate change, that just isn't long enough to know if things are getting worse. But there's one amazing archive of weather information. And this scientist is on his way to study it. This forest is in Louisiana, the heart of hurricane country, and it may hold the key. It's well inland, but it wears the scars of its long-running battles with the wind. These are called tip-ups, trees that have been blown right over with their root systems exposed. Their direction of fall tells us they probably were victims of a hurricane. This is a tree core. Scientists drill right through the center of the trunk, taking a sample of every tree ring. They can examine what happened to the tree each year of its life. Trees carry their history with them, some since before Columbus first came to America. Even if a tree only loses its leaves to a hurricane, It records the trauma in its growth pattern. This piece of wood holds the history of this region's hurricanes within it. They hope they can use it to reconstruct how many hurricanes have been through here and how severe they were year on year over a century. Tree cores may help show if hurricanes are increasing long term. This could have global implications. Narrower or missing rings can indicate hurricane damage. If global warming continues, rising sea levels could make hurricanes even more damaging. Some scientists think we should fight back. Instead of defending ourselves against hurricanes, we should try to stop them in their tracks by manipulating the weather itself. This team from MIT in Boston has brought an artificial hurricane to study how it draws energy from the sea. Their strategy is to block the storm where it feeds. They plan to spread a layer of oil only 1 molecule thick over the surface of the ocean. They believe it will stop the hurricane from drawing in the heat from the sea and never let it get started. Many scientists are skeptical about whether this can be made to work. Another approach uses these amazing absorbent granules. The researchers are trying to take the moisture directly out of the atmosphere. They intend to use aircraft to scatter a cloud of granules into a hurricane. The granules are designed to suck in moisture as they fall through the clouds. The team targets the hurricane's weaker side. If they can remove moisture, they hope the distinctive spinning motion will break up. It's like soaking up the storm with blotting paper. While many are skeptical, they believe the test signs are promising. For now, we can only admire the majesty of hurricanes. They're amongst the strongest storms on Earth, crisscrossing the ocean like it's their swimming pool. These giants help control the temperature and moisture across the entire planet. But they threaten coastal cities, even whole countries, with death and destruction. We can't stop these storms, and we don't even know enough to fully understand or predict them. They make us look insignificant. Hurricanes, a storm that is built for destruction.